Before we start this discussion about the indomitable Russian T-72, could I ask you to drop a like and leave a comment? The war in Ukraine has introduced us en masse to the fighting prowess of the Soviet-made T-72 tank. It's been the preeminent main battle tank of the Russian army during this invasion, and that is obvious just from the losses alone. According to the last updated records of Oryx, Russia alone has suffered the following confirmed T-72 losses across the variants: 2 T-72 Ural, 37 T-72s, 9 T-72 AVs, 365 T-72 BS, 29 T-72 BAs, 538 T-72 B3s, 112 T-72s of unknown variants, making a combined total of 1,092 T-72s lost since February 2022. That is 53% of the total tank losses of 2061. In contrast, the much smaller tank fleet held by Ukraine has lost a combined number of 140 T-72s of various models. Prior to the 2022 invasion, the IISS estimated that Ukraine had 500 T-72 tanks in storage. After the invasion, various countries including the United States, Poland, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, North Macedonia, and Bulgaria donated T-72 tanks to Ukraine. 20 Moroccan T-72B tanks were sent to Ukraine in January 2023 after being modernized in the Czech Republic. As of June 2023, more than 310 T-72 tanks were visually confirmed to have been captured by the Ukrainians as part of the Russian losses of 1,092. The T-72 Ural main battle tank was developed as a cheaper and more reliable alternative to the T-64. Its designers used proven components whenever possible, improved existing components were required, and designed new components only when it was necessary. They pushed out the first prototype in 1968 and it entered service in 1973. The first iteration of the T-72 was produced between 1974 and 1975, and only 950 were built before they moved to updated models. Eventually, a total of 17,831 T-72 series tanks of all variants were produced in the Soviet Union until 1990. During the late 1990s, the Russian army operated around 9,000 of these tanks. By 2020, only 2,034 T-72 series tanks of all variants reportedly remained in active service with the Russian army, though many of these tanks were kept in storage. Over 10,000 of these tanks were licensed produced in Czechoslovakia, India, Romania, and Yugoslavia. The T-72 was exported to around 30 countries. Front armor was equivalent to around 410 millimeters of steel. At the time of its introduction, the tank could withstand any 105 mm munitions at ranges greater than 500 meters, the same guns equipping Western tanks at the time. The front armor could also not be penetrated by Dragon or TOW anti-tank guided missiles of the time. Side armor provided protection against IFV and helicopter cannons. The first version of the tank had flip-up armored shields on the sides. Later production models were fitted with rubber side skirts. The T-72 has an NBC protection system. Interior is lined with anti-radiation liner, which has a dual purpose for reducing spalling. There is also an automatic fire extinguishing system. The tank was fitted with a 125 mm D81TM smoothbore gun. This gun fired munitions at a much higher muzzle velocity than the Western 105 mm rifled guns of the era. It was also fitted with the new Carousel type autoloader, which was a massive upgrade on the poorer performing T-64 autoloader. Despite being slower than the T-64's loader, it didn't tend to eat the arm of the gunner, like the T-64 did. Maximum rate of fire is up to 8 rounds per minute. If required, the gun can be loaded manually at a rate of 1 to 2 rounds per minute, despite the tank not carrying a loader crewman like Western tanks. A total of 39 rounds are carried for the main gun. The autoloader holds 22 rounds, while remaining ammunition is stored inside the hull. Effective range of fire with APF-SDS round is about 2 to 3,000 meters during the day and 850 to 1,300 meters at night. Armor penetration is around 600 to 630 mm of rolled homogeneous armor at a 2000 m range. Germans estimated that the Soviet T-72 could penetrate frontal armor of the early Leopard 2 tanks at a range of 1,500 meters and frontal armor of Leopard 1 tanks at more than 3,000 meters. With the addition of Leopard to the Ukrainian battlefield and the abundance of T-72s, this may be something to consider. Remember, it only takes one well-placed round to cause trouble for the Western tanks. Secondary armament consists of a coaxial 7.62 mm machine gun and a 12.7 mm machine gun, mounted on top of the roof in the open mount. The initial version had an optical rangefinder. Laser rangefinder was added on later production models. The night sight was a weakness by Western standards and would have given the advantage to the Western tank in a one-on-one battle. The tank had a crew of 3, including commander, gunner and driver. The autoloader doing away with the standard Western loader position. The T-72 is powered by a V46 diesel engine, developing 780 horsepower. It has improved suspension over its predecessor. It uses 6 larger road wheels, similar to those of the T-55 and T-62 series tanks. The vehicle is fitted with a deep wading kit and can ford water obstacles up to 5 meters deep. So it kills and can swim. As you would expect with a tank having these production numbers, there have been a lot of variants, all adding something to improve a specific function or the overall performance. Now, for timing reasons, there is no point in going through all of these, so I have cherry-picked what I considered to be the most important. There was the T-72 Ural K command tank with additional radio, navigation equipment and auxiliary power unit. Ammunition load was reduced to 31 rounds. The T-72 Ural 1 had improved armor protection. The gun was fitted with a thermal sleeve to prevent thermal distortion of the barrel. It was also fitted with an infrared searchlight on the gunner's side of the turret. This version replaced the baseline T-72. 5,250 of these tanks were built. They then produced a downgraded export version of the T-72 Ural 1. It has thinner armor, downgraded NBC protection system and came with an alternative set of ammunition for the main gun. Front arc of the turret was 400 to 410 mm thick, while front arc of the hull was 205 mm thick. After the T-72 Ural 1 came the T-72A, which was a further improved production version. It had several upgrades, including increased armor protection, improved 246M gun and improved V46-6 engine, which was further upgraded to a V84 at a later date. Composite armor with non-metallic filler was used. New sights and observation devices were fitted. This tank was also fitted with a laser rangefinder. Ammunition storage for the main gun was increased to 44 rounds. Side skirts were added. The type was fitted with smoke grenade dischargers. There isn't a definitive number of the T-72A tanks delivered to the Army, but it was estimated between 5,200 and 7,700 units. The T-72M export version of the T-72A with thinner armor, less capable composite armor, downgraded weapon systems and downgraded NBC protection system. The front arc of the turret was 450 mm thick, while the front arc of the hull was 215 mm thick. Also, it came with an alternative set of ammunition for the main gun. This tank was licensed-produced in Poland and Czechoslovakia. The T-72M would be upgraded by the T-72M1 with thicker armor. A 16 mm armor plate was added above the driver's station. Its composite armor consists of various layers of steel and a fiberglass compound with phenolic resin. This model appeared in 1982. The T-72M1 was used as a target for testing against 105 mm APF-SDS rounds fired from an M68 tank gun of the M68-3 tank in Austria. The results revealed that the M68-3 was unable to defeat the front armor of the T-72M1 with available ammunition. The ineffectiveness of the contemporary Western tanks would be highlighted during the Iran-Iraq War. In the opening stages of the war, Iraqi tank battalions equipped with T-72s neutralized Iranian armor in multiple engagements reportedly suffered no losses at all, with even M68 anti-tank guns and TOW anti-tank missiles proving wholly ineffective. At least one engagement pitting T-62 and T-72 units against Iranian armor saw the Iranians lose over 100 tanks, with Iraqi losses limited to around a dozen, most of them T-62s. The next model of the T-72 was the T-72B, which came with thicker turret armor. It was also fitted with Contact 1 explosive reactive armor for a higher level of protection. This add-on armor increased protection against heat rounds. A total of 227 containers with explosive reactive armor were fitted. The tank uses a modernized TU-46M tank gun. Smoke grenade dischargers were relocated to the turret side. There was a new OR-173P radio, which reportedly had a range of 20 kilometers. By 2020, the T-72B was the most widely used tank in active service with the Russian Army, and the most numerous version of the T-72. By that time, some were being upgraded to the T-72B3 standard. These tanks were widely used during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. By April 2023, it was documented that Russia lost at least 259 of these tanks. The T-72AV is an upgraded version of the T-72A fitted with Contact 1 add-on explosive reactive armor. This armor offers additional protection against heat rounds. Protection of the turret, over the front arc, is equivalent to 410 to 500 mm against APF-SDS munitions and 500 to 560 mm against heat munitions. Protection of the hull, over the front arc, is equivalent to 360 to 420 mm against APF-SDS munitions and 490 to 500 mm against heat munitions. Since 1985, several T-72A tanks were upgraded to this standard. The T-72S is the export version of the T-72B with a downgraded NBC protection system. These tanks also lack anti-radiation lining. It has 115 containers with Contact 1 explosive reactive armor instead of 227 as on Soviet tanks. Its armor protection is equivalent to that of the T-72M1. In 1993, a number of these tanks were adopted by the Russian Army due to the cancellation of some export orders. The T-72BM was a late production version of the T-72B, fitted with Contact 5 explosive reactive armor. The Contact 5 was superior to the Contact 1. It provided protection not only against heat rounds, but against kinetic energy munitions as well. This tank can be also identified by a round infrared searchlight at the front of the turret. Production ceased with the introduction of the T-90. This was the last newly built variant of the T-72, while newer models of the T-72 were essentially based on existing refurbished and upgraded hulls. The T-72BA was a lower-cost upgraded version of the T-72B, designed to make use of their production numbers. It was fitted with the more advanced Contact 5 ERA armor. The T-72BA is often incorrectly identified as the T-72BM, though this tank can be identified by a presence of a wind sensor. Since 2003, these tanks were fitted with a V92S2 diesel, developing 1,000 horsepower. Older T-72B tanks were refurbished and upgraded to the T-72BA standard. By 2020, Russian Army had a total of 93 of these tanks in active service. Then came the T-72B3 upgrade. Those tanks undergoing refurbishment and upgrading were fitted with new fire control systems and some other improvements. It has a hunter-killer capability, using the new sight Sosnayu. One of the eye-catching features of the T-72B3 are the sharp wedge-shaped ERA elements on the tank's turret. Later production models have a more powerful engine, developing 1,130 horsepower, which is a staggering power improvement since the first T-72. By 2020, a total of 558 of the Russian Army's T-72 tanks were upgraded to this standard. The T-72B3M is a further upgrade with the new TU-46M5 125mm smoothbore gun, which is an advanced version of the TU-46M cannon, improved fire control system with thermal sight, panoramic commander's sight and new engine. It is also protected with the new relict ERA. This version is sometimes unofficially referred as the T72B4. By 2020 a total of 248 of the Russian Army's T-72 tanks were upgraded to this standard. So they have been active in Ukraine and they have been smoked by the home side too. Interestingly, the T-72M is a Ukrainian refurbished and upgraded version of the T-72M main battle tank. Ukraine had many T-72 series tanks that were inherited after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Various Ukrainian refurbished and upgraded versions of the T-72 were being offered for export customers. The T-72M tank was first publicly revealed in 2017. The type was adopted by the Ukrainian Army, however overall, the procurement of less than 50 units was planned. In 2021 at least another 5 tanks were delivered to Ukrainian Army. These Ukrainian tanks saw combat in 2022 against the Russian Army. Key improvements included a more powerful engine, improved protection and firepower. Aiming and communication systems were also improved. However, in terms of combat capabilities this tank loses to the recent Russian T-72B3 modernization. Of course, after all of these models and upgrades, you got the T-90, which uses a T-72 hull and turret. But that's purely for interest's sake as the rest of it is T-80U and significant upgrades making it kind of look like a T-72 only. In conclusion, the war on Ukraine has put massive strain on the Russian defense industry. Couple that with sanctions and you start to see the bastardization of variants and production efforts. Gear starts to get interchanged and significantly downgraded due to availability and ERA is put into strange places, like the roofs as problems are fed back from the battlefield with help being needed. It doesn't mean new models are being dreamed up but rather that Russia is starting to Bush mechanic the heck out of their tank forces to keep them moving. The latest iterations of the T-72 remain a formidable force, even to a Western tank. Their place when handled correctly is clearly still on the battlefield and I will expect many more to serve and to burn out in the days, weeks, and months to come.